Hello friends, good morning and welcome to the EduSat Network. Our topic of discussion today shall be Communication, a Pragmatic Approach. And for this very discussion and lecture, we have with us in our studio Dr. K.K. Kathuria, retired professor of English Department, also chairman, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. He has taught in the university for about 40 years. In addition to his vast experience, Dr. Kathuria also has to his credit a number of foreign assignments and academic visits to United States, United Kingdom and Australia amongst many others. Friends, I would like to tell you his specialization includes modern British poetry and phonetics. Friends, we are quite privileged to have Sir amongst us in our studio, and we have requested him to speak extempore, and Sir has chosen to interact with the viewers on our topic, as I introduced at the beginning, Communication, a Pragmatic Approach. So with this brief introduction, I'd like to welcome Sir to our studio.
Thank you
for coming, Sir.
Thank you. Hello viewers, it's a pleasure being on EduSat today, this morning, and interacting with you on a topic of contemporary relevance, that is communication. And I would like to carry to this particular topic a very pragmatic approach, that is trying to focus on the fundamentals, on the basic concepts, rather than building up on theories, lest I should be giving you a dose or an overdose of all theoretical postulates, which you might have had a lot of them. See, the purpose of my lecture today is, or my introduction today is, to add to your learning or reinforce what you have already learned by way of highlighting and elaborating and clarifying certain fundamentals that go to constitute the entire matrix of communication. Let's beginning with the beginning. See, when a human child is born and the mother is cradling the little baby in the crook of her arm, what kind of image do we conceive? Try a little in your mind and try to visualize how do you find the child cradling in the crook of the mother. I'm pretty sure that you know the image, you can visualize the image, but there should be some problem as regards communicating that image in language. Now, what I believe is that more than the image that we conceive, it is the rendering of that communication in language that leaves an impact on the listeners and impact of your own personality. Now, when I would look, for example, at such a divine glory of the child cradling in the crook of the arm of the mother, I would say, well, wonderful, splendid cherub, a little angel, but a very quiet grace. Mind my words, quiet grace. Not many of us would know that in the heart of her heart, the mother would be wishing her to grow up into a very graceful communicator later. So, from quiet grace to grateful speaker, that sums up the whole story of communication that we carry out day in and day out in the journey of this life. So, this will give me an idea that communication is a basic human urge. We all wish to communicate as we wish to love and be loved. We wish to speak and wish to be spoken to in myriad ways, in the form of conversation, in the form of public speaking, in the form of group discussions, in the form of family chat, and also in the form of tete-a-tete if you happen to be a romantic lover. So the fact then that we conclude is that it is a basic human urge that is gratified only when we are able to properly communicate our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions. Now, if we go by this corollary, we would like to put a proposition. Imagine a situation for a while where a group of people are either dumb sitting or they are huddled quiet for a long time. What would happen? It is disgusting. It's repression, killing one's inner urge to articulate, to speak. And it cannot go on for a long time. This is going to explode either in a very loud laughter or an irritable behavior. But then let's remember again that laughter and irritation are both forms of communication. So communication must happen. It is natural. It's an urge that we cannot hold back for a long time. Therefore, that should underscore the importance of communication in our life. As long as we live here, we have to carry along ourselves very well in the world, and that is possible of other activities, the communicative activity as well. So communication is not just the use of language. Communication is you. Communication is me. Communication is you and me genetically, socially, emotionally, psychologically, and intellectually. Now, some may even come out with the idea that communication, of course, is language, and therefore is a matter of style much more than content. Yes, style it is, and let it be. But then I am reminded of a certain classical adage which believed that style is the man. And if style is the man, then whatever communication you and I participate in, we are actually unknowingly projecting our own personality, projecting our own true selves. I'll just illustrate. Supposing you on a particular day or your father at home is expecting to receive guests, and the guests are about to arrive, and you babies are playing, let's say, in the room. Now your father would make it sure that you go upstairs so that he is huddled with the guests privately. So he has to communicate. He has to say something to you. One mode would be that he would say, "Up you go, my boys." So you go up. Another mode would be, "Would you please mind going upstairs, my boys?" See, he has communicated the same idea, the same urge, the same concept in two different styles. One is formal, "Would you mind please going upstairs?" The other is, one is formal, "Up you go, my boys," and one is informal. So you and I would begin believing that it is the language that he has used which has made his message either formal or informal. Well, I would agree in a certain sense, yes. But let's try to reflect a little harder. Language he has definitely come out with, but where is language? Language is in the mind. So when a particular father, or let's say particular speaker like me and you, when we are trying to use language, play with language in order to interact and communicate, the language is actually flowing from the mind. It may seem, obviously, as I am speaking right now, that I am using my vocal cords, I am using my entire vocal system to produce signs which I call language. Apparently, yes. But then, if we try to look at it a little deeply and understand it more closely, we shall be able to find out that the thought, the idea, the message, the emotion that I want to convey actually rests in my mind rather than in my vocal system. Nobody can contradict this particular philosophy. So things would first happen to my mind, which is my inner self. Language would take shape there only. Structures would be shuffled and reshuffled in order to make the message viable only in the mind. And only then my vocal cords would be able to take direction from the mind and say things as they are said. So when I speak using my vocal cords, I am actually being on the surface. Chomsky, for example, a great linguist of 20th century, would always make a distinction between the surface structure of language and the deep structure of language. And he would convince us, and we shall be convinced by all means, as I put forward the whole view now, that if I never had a mind, I would never be able to communicate. So it is the mind, it is your inner self, it is you exactly who is communicating, and whatever you communicate is the language, but language first happens in the mind. So I would say language is you, communication is you, communication is me. When I communicate, I project my inner self. When you communicate, you reflect your inner self, and this would bring us to the fact that communication is not style, communication is the man, or style is not the man, but communication is the man. Now, given this kind of premise, I would say something that is related to it further. When we speak, obviously we speak language. But then, do we always carry the belief that language is just language? I would say language or speech is not just language or speech, it is an act. We have the whole entire theory of speech act by Grice and others, who would convince us that speech is an act. For example, when I say something to my child, I may give him an order, I may give him a command, I may even put a request before him, I may even make a plea. So all plea, command, request, order, and so many other such expressions are expressions, all right, but they are actions at the same time. So speech is action, and action by all means is your thought. So action and thought constitute your personality. So communication is actually your personality. Now, communication, as I said, projects you as convincingly as you wish to. It is a reflection of your personality, of your whole attitude, and it is you who are being either appreciated or criticized on the basis of what you have communicated. So the center is you. I'll try to illustrate by a very personal example, and you would like the way I or anybody would react and act in such a situation. I was relieved of my job recently, which was a very lucrative job, and those people who were to relieve me, they organized a very seemingly warm farewell. Of course, everybody was saying things, but everybody, when they were saying things, they were actually reflecting their true selves vis-a-vis me. Some would appreciate me and I could see the hypocrisy in that. Some would appreciate me and I could see the genuineness in that. So, hypocrisy and genuineness actually is the personality. It's being communicated, so communication would ultimately reflect your inner self. Now, when I was asked to speak, I was being very candid, I was being very genuine, and I told them that my stay in that particular institute had been pretty good, it has been pretty rewarding, but at the same time, I'm qualifying, at the same time, I had certain moments when I felt diffused, when I felt like a fish out of water, because the environment wouldn't be as conducive to my functioning as a teacher as I expected. And then to endorse what I felt, I gave something in Hindi, which I would like to render here for your recreation sake. I said, diffused did I feel? Yes. बट जब मैं बिखरा हूँ दुगनी रफ्तार से निखरा हूँ. जब मैं बिखरा हूँ दुगनी रफ्तार से निखरा हूँ. अभी तो कई जीत और कई हार बाकी हैं, अभी तो ज़िंदगी का सार बाकी है. इस इंस्टीट्यूट में आना, और ये इंस्टीट्यूट तो एक पन्ना था, अभी तो पूरी किताब बाकी है. एंड दे ऑल गेव ए बिग applause. Now try to see the point I am trying to make. It is words, yes, but more than the words is my personality that attracted and that invited kudos and applause for me. Now, see, situation was there and all of us were responding to that situation. This brings me to pause for a while on a little theory. I would not expand it, as I said in the beginning. This is called stimulus response theory. The entire communications that we are engaged in day in and day out throughout our life is patterned on that stimulus response theory, which is a behavioral psychology, perhaps propounded by Bloomfield in the 19th century. So, whenever there is a stimulus, there is a response. There was a stimulus, that is farewell party, and we all responded in the form of communication. Now, if I elaborate it a little, I would say that stimulus response would have a prerequisite. That is, there has to be a speaker in order for communication to take place, and there has to be a listener. But then speaker and listener do not ever communicate in a void, in vacuum. So, there has to be a situation or a context to that particular meeting of the speaker and the listener, so that communication takes place. And in addition to this, if we imagine that we have a speaker all right, and we have a listener all right, and we have a situation all right, but if the listener and the speaker do not share the same channel between them, what I mean is, if they do not share face-to-face interaction, if they do not are not engaged in telephonic interaction, if they are not engaged in the EduSet media as you and I are right now, if there is no channel, then communication well nigh will be difficult. More so, there has to be a proper code, a code which is common to both the speaker and the listener. You know, if for example I am speaking in let's say Arabic, I can give you one example. Ana ishti hada abed TV. Now I am speaking and you happen to be listeners there, but has the communication taken place? Perhaps no. So the code between the speaker and the listener has to be common. So let me recount. We have postulated that for any communication to happen, there has to be a speaker, there has to be a listener, there has to be a channel, there has to be a code, and at the same time, there has to be a message. If I have nothing to convey, if I have nothing to communicate to my listeners, I'll be dumbfounded, or I'll be confused. I'll not be able to jot my ideas in a very coherent way. So message is one essential component of communication. And last but not least, we require communication to happen very properly and very meaningfully. There has to be a context. There has to be a situation. So all these factors, all these ingredients will make communication possible, provided the listener and the speaker are enthusiastically interested in the interaction. If they are not interested, if they do not love each other, if they are indifferent to each other, communication will suffer to that particular extent. Now, as I was talking of behavioral psychology of stimulus and response, not many would be able to perhaps comprehend that this theory took place in 19th century, and if anybody like me had an idea of this kind of theory, would found it too limited. Now this theory is stating ingredients which are very valid and have to be there, but then it's saying that there has to be a stimulus and there has to be a response, which means stimulus and response perhaps would happen in the same ratio. So if, for example, I have learned an infinite rules of grammar, and if I have learnt a certain limited vocabulary, should I be always in my communication repeating the same thing over and over again? Should my mind not be able to generate new sentences, generate new expressions, and make communication more interesting and more engaging? And as a reaction to this, came up the theory which is called cognitive theory in the 20th century by Chomsky once again. Now Chomsky proposed that stimulus response theory is okay, but it's limited, it's constrained by certain restrictions, because human mind, which is a great creation of God, is not as simple as to produce or reproduce what it has already been fed with. Generally, most often, and in fact always, we shall see that the input that we put into the mind linguistically, language wise, rules of grammar, let's say, or vocabulary or structures, etc., they will have to be by law limited. If there are 100 rules of grammar, we can add one to it, but not many to it. So my mind has been given an input of, let's say, 100 rules. Similarly, a limited vocabulary, given the capacity of the mind to remember and to store things. But then the wonderful thing that he came out with was that with this limited input, human mind is able to generate infinite number of sentences till we live and till we die. For example, if instantly I think of a simplest possible sentence, I like you, she likes me, they like her, I like my mother. So I am actually repeating as a drill the same pattern of grammar, and kind of jumbling and shuffling the same words over and over again. So there is a stimulus and there is a response, but then is the story limited to that? Next time my mind, which is a miracle, may think of like not exactly as a verb always, but as an adverb, as an adjective, etc. And I may say, I am as good or bad as you. I am not different. So I am using like in a different way and generating a new communication. So this cognitive theory definitely is an extension upon, and a very very revolutionary extension upon the earlier behavioral psychology theory, and it emphasizes the fact that with finite input, the human mind, which is a miracle created by God, can generate infinite number of sentences, and it is this and this alone which makes communication of all kind possible. I'll give you one example. See, you and I all are these days tech savvy. We all are addicted to, as if there are so many jokes coming around on the Facebook and on WhatsApp, etc. We are addicted to these applications of technology, so much so that we some of us even might have lost our sleep, or might have slept for shorter hours. It's such engaging exercise, such engaging fun. So there was one day an occasion when I opened my Facebook account, and there appeared a certain application which said death analysis for you. So you feed the data, which is already there actually in the Facebook, and then the app would work out by a certain mechanism the date and time of your death, and also the cause of your death. So I first shuddered, like anybody of you would shudder. Now, why should I be able to use this application? Because if the result would be that I am going to die tomorrow, well, I'll not only die, I'll lose my sense of communication as well. But then I dared, and then the app showed, sadly enough, or I don't know, that I would be dying very shortly, that my death was imminent. Now, I knew as a mature person that in this immortally ruled world, mortals do not have as much capacity to analyze your final doom. So I just responded to that stimulus, which is entirely a new stimulus. I never might have thought of using language this way. I said, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, non-stop. I'm thankful to Facebook for having provided me such a big fun. But then remember, the situation is the same. When my friends came across this kind of analysis of my life and death, etc., most of them posted on online that they were sad to know this, they were sad to notice this. Some of them even expressed pain in their own terms. So the same situation, the same feedback, the same stimulus, and multiple responses. Now, this is the beauty of language, and much more than this is the beauty of human mind. So I would believe that communication is not just an exercise in the use of language. Communication is a human urge which is gratified when we are able to properly play with the words, when we are able to properly communicate and articulate our ideas, because at a certain deeper level, our communication is going to be and is in fact a reflection on our personality, a reflection on our attitude, because personality is a very fair combination of your emotional, behavioral, social and intellectual and psychological inside of you, and therefore communication would always carry your personality with you. And mother therefore in the beginning had expectation and wanted to groom you in such a way that from a quiet grace you grow into a graceful communicator, meaning thereby that the moment she realized that my son is a human being, he is ultimately be entering into the vast human world, he shall be having this basic urge to communicate. Therefore, right from that day, she started feeding her mind with sanskaras, with good things of life. But then how was that possible? Let's look back. It was possible because she had language. And it was through language that she was trying to inculcate in the mind of the young baby all those thoughts, all those emotions, all those sanskaras would ultimately, which ultimately would constitute his personality. And the language that she was always exposing him to was language that was amiable, that was decent, that must go with the sanskaras. So this is how human mind grows, and this is how human mind is able to cope with the reality, harsh reality of this life. And it is possible only and only through your communication, not only linguistic, not only verbal, all kinds of communications are involved. And each act of communication that we commit is an act, and each act is equivalent to our thought, and act and thought are equal to personality. So communication is personality, communication is you, communication is me, communication is the man. Now this is what I want you to talk about as the basics and the fundamentals, which might not have been given to you the way we have been able to have them right now. But there is a fundamental question, there is a problem involved, and we cannot just run away from the problem. As a teacher, I have come across thousands of students, particularly from Haryana, although I happen to be studying at Hyderabad as well, who would always come to me with this inhibition, with this proposition that, sir, English is a difficult language. English is difficult to master, and therefore thinking of communicating in English, no, so we can't do it. Now my answer to them would be, because we are communicating, see that. So they came out with this stimulus, and I am now responding to their stimulus. So I would convince them, look here, all those all those people who have excelled in communication skills, all those people who have fame and repute as speakers of good English, they all happen to be hailing from grassroots, most of them. So let us not say that we are not able to learn English because it's difficult. English is not difficult. What is needed is a certain level of motivation. If we have motivation, we can learn anything. What to say of English? There have been players, there have been politicians, there have been leaders, One can think of Abraham Lincoln, for example. I would even say one can look at Modi, for example. Was he born to be a prime minister this way? He had to work very hard. Abraham Lincoln had to work very hard even amidst failures. And if I would talk about myself and my teachers, they all had to face and confront a lot of challenges in order to rise and become teachers of English. So to them, to all those who would have this kind of complex that they are not able to learn English, and therefore communicating in English is not their cup of tea. I would suggest two words which are actually acronym of two good ideas. Now, one acronym is me. That would mean my confidence. That would mean my attitude to take on challenges. And as I decode this acronym, it would simply mean motivation, M, and E means exposure. Motivation is the most essential prerequisite of learning anything. May it be sports, may it be language, may it be any other activity that we can excel in. Motivation in simple words would mean how enthusiastic you are in how enthusiastic and how interested you are in taking upon a challenge and mastering it and succeeding in that particular challenge. And E for me would be exposure. Let's go back to that mother-child relationship in the beginning of life. The child would be able to learn those sanskaras through the use of language by the mother. So, in a very subtle sense, the mother was trying to give exposure to the child of that language. Supposing the child happened to be deaf. If he would be deaf, then the exposure would be curtailed to that extent. And likelihood is that he would not be able to become a very reputed communicator later in life. So exposure is now the most required exercise that we must practice every day. Exposure can be had to the TV, to those channels which render every program in English. Exposure can be had through the good books, or where, let's say, short stories, where every time you come across dialogues where characters are very actively engaged in communicating with each other. Not only that, you will be having exposure to language. In turn, you will be able to imbibe a lot of vocabulary, and that would facilitate your communication competence. And once you have that, you would be able to feel a little more confident in yourself, and that would be very okay. The second acronym that I am going to place before you is called PET. So together it's me pet or my pet. Now pet would mean practice. Remember, when the child is exposed to the mother's language or mother's language spoken to the child so frequently, the child is trying to actually assimilate that which mother is giving to him. And on a particular day, the child may come up with one single letter pa. The moment pa is uttered by the child, the mother is sure that the child is on the right track and would be able to learn the language. By the time the child is 2.5 or 2, he is a perfect speaker of his mother tongue. He is a good communicator. Amazing sometimes, So, practice the child is doing rather internally. So we have to practice or keep practicing language internally at the level of mind, and at the same time we have to practice language in our company, in our group, with the people around, because we know that unless we have the speaker and the listener communication, is not that meaningful activity. At the same time, E in that PET would stand for environment. The students, the learners, you and me, we already have known that for being perfect, for getting a kind of excellence in any activity, may that be communication or the use of language, we need to have a proper environment. Now, if most of us are not able to be confident speakers or confident communicators, and therefore sometimes we have to fail in cracking a job, it is because we are not being provided with proper environment. But then, as an individual, if I am motivated enough to go ahead with my communication competence and enhance it further, the moment I am sure that I need to get more and more exposure to the language that I want to specialize in, so my motivation and my exposure would induce me to practice that particular language and mode of communication as often as I can, and I would automatically be inspired to create for myself a company of certain friends, maybe of family members, where I shall be able to properly communicate in English, and I would be getting all kind of self-stroking sometimes, and also shabash from my friends and my relatives or my family members, and that is going to ultimately make you a good speaker or a good communicator. In addition to this, and last but not least, we need to be seeking some training, because on our own, with our own ardent efforts, we may not be able to make that particular or achieve that particular level of competence in our communication as we ought to have or as we're expecting. So we have to first try to assess ourselves, we try to identify our weaknesses, and accordingly we try to approach or have an access to somebody who can train our mind, who can provide us further practice and training in this particular field of activity. And I'm sure that if we keep on doing all these 5 exercises which are crammed into these 2 acronyms, me and PET, we should be able to come up very well. This is my belief, and I wish you all well. But then remember, as a teacher, I would like to give you a particular message to imbibe it for life. You may be cherishing the belief that you are the learners. In fact, I am the first learner. A teacher is the first learner. A teacher is always a learner. And once we all believe that we are learners and we have to continuously keep learning, and if we keep continuously learning, in this case a kind of competence in communication skills, I am sure we can always improve, because there is always scope for improvement. Last message: learning without thinking is a waste of time. If I have given you certain points to learn and you do not ever think about those points, if you do not reflect upon those points, if you are indifferent to those points, if you just are a run-of-the-mill learner, if you are not an avid learner, if you are not an enthusiastic learner, if you do not spare time from your routine activities and spend some rigorous time on thinking what you have learned, then learning without thinking is waste of time. And thinking without learning, if I go on thinking, if I go on doing my, let's say, exercises just at the level of my mind and do not translate them into action, well, nothing is going to happen concretely and substantially. So learning without thinking is waste of time, and thinking without learning is dangerous. So let's avoid both. So let's be interested as enthusiastically, as passionately as we ought to, so that we are able to pick up and become good communicators. And once we have learnt a couple of things, we should be thinking about them so that we are able to assimilate them as a part of our personality later. And this is how we will improve each day, every day, till a point of time comes when we are able to feel within ourselves this particular feeling that yes, I can. Yes, I can. And with this particular message, I would just quote E.M. Forster, a great English writer. Passion is that works. And there is no comparison to passion. And he said in Howards End, his novel, a passionate person is equal to 40 people merely interested. A passionate person is equal to 40 people merely interested. So let us not be merely interested. Let's not join the crowd. Let's not follow the crowd. Let's be distinctive. Let's be our unique self. Let's work hard. Let's be enthusiastic learners. Let's take interest. And the day is not far when, having gathered some fundamentals of communication without much of a theory, and when you assimilate and understand these fundamentals and work on them enthusiastically, be sure, I bet, you are going to be wonderful communicators one day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, in fact, for that very interesting lecture and wonderfully ideas that you provided us towards the end, the gyan that we have received from you. And of course, I cannot stop myself from enumerating them once more, that one should not be learning and spare themselves from the process of thinking. That's extremely significant. So important, like you said, to reflect on the ideas that we learn, and one must be an avid, enthusiastic learner, like you just said. And again, then thinking without learning would also be a futile exercise in that sense. So important to translate that into action. And of course, one must be passionate about at least something in life. So like you also talked about in the beginning, I would just like to reinforce the idea that the lecture has definitely added to our learning and reinforced our already acquired knowledge about communication, and we were also able to clarify the very fundamentals of communication, and that became even more effective. Like sir made use of real life experiences, he gave examples from his life. And friends, before we sum up or we talk about the main points of the lecture, I'd just like to pose a question to sir.
Okay, welcome.
And sir, you had talked about an example from Facebook, a certain encounter that you had with a certain software. And with respect to that, I would like to know how the viewers would benefit from that example, and would you like to explain more about how that could help to improve communication?
See, this particular software, as you said, is a software that provides a lot of fun to people.
True.
And those particular people would be able to approach and use that software who have a little courage, who are a little daring, because nobody would like to have a prediction of one's death.
True.
That is one thing. The second is, you have to realize, because the Facebook says that everything that we give you here is for fun.
True.
So you have to enjoy. It may be death analysis, it may be life analysis next time, and if you, for example, use software on life analysis, it may even give you a very happy information, but that would clearly not mean that that's going to happen there, as I said, because we all are living here in the mortal world, but it's immortally ruled.
True.
And inscrutable are the ways of God to man, it's not just possible that any prediction that anybody makes is to be accepted as such. But then the Facebook software has its own sense of enjoyment, because there are people who have known their death analysis, and it says that they are going to live 120 years. Again fun, because in such a modern silly world, living for 120 years is not possible, because we are not saints, so to say.
Absolutely.
The kind of sedentary lifestyle that we lead.
Absolutely.
So everything that Facebook and other social media are doing, they are trying to create a lot of fun in our lives, so that the boredom, the tedium that we are caught in and day out in our life, we get a little relief. But then one should be sure that if one uses such a software, one should be a believer all through, and one should have a little courage. Otherwise, one is doomed, to have read one's analysis.
Sir. Right. Thank you so much, sir, for explaining that. And I came across a certain idea where we, while talking about the various ways of communicating, we talked about laughter and irritation also being forms of communication.
Yeah. See, any feeling, any thought that you express, it may be a negative one, it may be a positive one, they are actually expression. Repression is something that I would like to avoid.
Right.
As far as possible, because repression is very killing within. So it's not only it can be sometimes liking, it can be sometimes disliking, it can sometimes be appreciation, it can sometimes be criticism. Well, we should always be trying to be positive towards other in our communication and in our behavior, but at the same time, nothing exists in absolute terms.
Absolutely.
Even a positive sentiment, for example, or positivity, as Jung, and Freud would say, is not the absence of negativity. I mean, I have yet to see a scripture, maybe the Bible or maybe the Gita, which says that happiness exists in isolation in absolute terms, or sadness exists in absolute terms. Happiness is never the absence of sadness.
True.
So it is for us to make effort to evolve within ourselves an attitude which is self-sustaining, which doesn't push us back into isolation or alienation, which actually is the order of the day today. So my suggestion would be that let's be positive, as I said, let's be enthusiastic, let's be passionate, and let's be avid readers. Let's be avidly exposing ourselves to better things of life, so that we grow into better personalities. And communication is a very powerful expression of our personality.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. And very interestingly, you shared with us two acronyms. You talked about ME and then PET. Sir, M would stand for motivation, and just recapitulating for our readers, E would be exposure.
Yeah.
And with the PET, P would be practice, E would be the environment we get to practice within, and T would be the requisite training.
Yeah, there are other finer nuances of these two acronyms actually.
True.
But then, given the constraint of time,
absolutely, sir,
and given the kind of solid material that we have to provide to our students, and we don't have to be very theoretical as well, because that would not meet the requirement of today's particular communication with the viewers. I limited them to the bare minimum, but I'm pretty sure that with motivation, and if there's no motivation, remember, if there's no motivation in the child, the child would not be able to learn as much of language as the mother expects him to learn. The same is true even in later life.
True.
So motivation is actually a fuel within us, and if the fuel is lying dormant, for example, as a tank full of fuel in a car would not drive the car.
Exactly.
So you need ignition.
You need ignition.
So either I ignite my fuel myself, or I allow somebody else or approach somebody else, let's say a trainer or a teacher or a well-wisher or a mentor, who would ignite my fuel inside me, so that the car of my life begins to move and takes off.
Absolutely.
So that is the value of motivation, and the teacher has a lot of role to play. But then initially, it is the learner himself who has to have his self motivation very strong. Similarly, exposure. Right from the day a child is born, exposure begins. And as I said, if the child happened to be deaf,
Right.
he would not be able to have much exposure to language.
Yes.
Likewise, if the child is given exposure to, let's say, the sounds of animals, he is kept in the company of animals,
Yes.
he would learn only animal sounds.
Yes.
And if a child, Hindu child or Indian child, is born in Britain and is exposed to English, he would be able to be a very good speaker of English.
True.
So exposure is a very important matter that ultimately is going to make you a very competent communicator.
True, true. So can we say that we could say that exposure and the environment are the same things?
Yeah, in a certain sense, yes, they actually overlap. But then environment is physical conditions where we begin to look upon as a handicap. Well, since when I go to the school, when I go to the college, I don't find many people, interacting in English, and I feel discouraged. And if we too choose to be talking in English always, will become a laughing stock for others. So what I meant was that we should be creating our own company, our own environment of people who are interested in you, who are interested in each other, because in any kind of communication competence to develop, empathy is an important factor. That is, I feel for my fellow beings and fellow beings feel for me, and if they empathize with each other, this is going to be a very great contributory factor to that particular achievement.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. And of course, friends, just to briefly summarize, today we have learned that communication is a basic human urge which can be conveyed through conversation, public speaking, and different ways. And also we have learned that communication is not just the use of language, but it is a projection of our personality. And friends, within the lecture we have also talked about the stimulus response theory, which is taken forward. We talked about also the cognitive theory, which came in the 20th century. And of course, it has been a very interesting lecture conveyed in a very lucid, clear manner for our students, that they would greatly benefit from this. And of course, with the time approaching to close the lecture, we must really thank sir for being here. Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate your presence here.
And thank EduSet. And I'm glad, and I believe that our interaction with the viewers would be ultimately beneficial to them and
definitely,
to me as well.
Sir. Definitely, sir.
Thank you
so much, sir. And we request you to be present with us on future occasions as well.
Okay, I'll be accepting it as an invitation. My pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, friends, for watching. Have a great day.
Thank you.